Welcome to another edition of Viper Voices. Today, very pleased to be joined by former Vernon Laker, current scout with the Dallas Stars, Dennis Holland. Vernon Product joins us. Dennis, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Nice to always be part of the alumni and a great organization. So I have lots of time for you.
Well, we really appreciate it. Obviously, with everything that's going on these days, lots of uncertainty, but that uncertainty brings opportunity. And this feature is a prime example of it. And we really appreciate getting a chance to connect with people who, at this time, I'm sure for you as a scout, you're probably still super busy keeping in contact with things, but how has your life sort of changed? Before we go back in the time machine, how has this pandemic sort of impacted yourself as a scout in the NHL and how the process with the draft coming has sort of changed a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the whole world stopped there. Well, I guess in North America, they're sort of mid-March, and we were sort of that's our sort of our crunch time. We're just going to start watching kids in the playoffs, getting our good reads on players come down the stretch in important games and in playoffs. When everything kind of gets shut down, you now have to find other avenues to kind of build up your memory bank and your knowledge of some of these players. So I've done lots of video scouting. I've talked lots to coaches, players. We usually get together, at the combine, which is in Buffalo. You get to talk to all these kids. So it's been a big impact because sort of that March through end of May, early June is a heavy lifting time for us scouts, and you get sequestered in your house. It's tough to get some of that stuff done.
Right, maybe if from a player's perspective as well, the guys who may have had playoff runs, whether it was in the Western League, the BCHL, whatever junior league, and they were draft eligible, all of a sudden they saw that sort of pulled from under them. How do you evaluate from there? Is it basically what you've seen up until that point? And with the fact that maybe playoffs would just be wrapping up with May long weekend, I know the RBC Cup or the Centennial Cup would have just been wrapping up, an opportunity of at least 2 more months that you would have had a chance to evaluate. How much impact does that put on the viewership that you've done before that?
Well, I mean, you sometimes ease your way into a scouting year and let some of these kids sort of develop and grow into their game. Lots of kids have left home for the very first time, so they need time to get adjusted to their new surroundings, their new league. So you have to go back to your memory banks. I've read lots of reports, early season reports again, and we're all in the same boat. It's not just like, our team is the only one that didn't get the last 2 months. We're all in the same boat. So, some players, somebody might get lucky later in the draft because maybe they live in an area or they got to see a player, a few more times in January and February than, somebody that I didn't or vice versa. So there might be a couple, wow, we got him that, at that point in the draft. If you would have had a good playoffs, you would have got picked earlier. So, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, but we're all in the same boat. So, it's not like one team has an upper hand on anybody.
You're based out of Vernon, it's where you call home, obviously, sort of a hub when it comes to being able to see Western Hockey League and BCHL hockey with a couple of markets, within a couple hours of driving. How does that sort of help you in terms of the Okanagan, where you're located, and how that helps you see game and the number of talent or the talent level that you see from both leagues at any point?
Well, it really is. I'm very fortunate where I live, where I was born and raised, and where I've come back to. The Vernons, the Salmon Arms, the Pentictons, the West Kelownas are always, Trail's an excellent franchise. I mean, that whole, Merritt has done a wonderful job with the opportunities that they are presented. So, I'm very fortunate. I don't have to go very far. And you get a lot of looks at maybe not some guys that are, first round material, but guys, mid round, late round guys where that's where we make our money. That's where we, some franchises, you go, wow, they got a deep organization because they draft well late in rounds. And, that BC Junior Hockey League has been a a feeding ground for later round picks that have turned out and been great pros. So I'm very fortunate. You say that, the Chilliwacks, the Victorias, Nanaimo's had, we drafted Ray Sawada, Nanaimo many years ago. The BC Junior Hockey League is a league to be reckoned with for sure. For college opportunities, but also some good players that turn pro.
Well, I would imagine it was very similar. I know the game itself has changed a lot since you were a junior hockey player, but you've obviously been involved with the game for so long, whether it was a junior hockey player, professional hockey player, all the way up through into the scouting department of the Dallas Stars. Let's go back to the beginning in 84, 85, 85, 86, when you were obviously a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. Some of the challenges that young players have to determine at that age is where they want to play, what they want to do, the fork in the road, if you will. You've got 2 years under your belt in Vernon. What sort of drew you to wanting to at least start your junior hockey career in Vernon, and how exciting as a young man to play in your hometown was it for you?
Well, first off, to be able to play in my hometown, my brother had gone through the Vernon cycle there, the ESO. So just to have the opportunity to play on the same organization that my brother had went through was a thrill. We weren't the strongest organization back in the day when I played. The Pentictons, the Kelowna Spartans were the sort of the team to be trying to knock down. But I loved my opportunity to play in Vernon. It gave me a couple more years to play and see if I developed where my game was going to go. I got lots of power play time. I was given an opportunity to play and grow. I wasn't a big guy, at 16, 17. So I needed that time to develop and even maturity wise, I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave. So I know what a lot of these young men are going through, these families, because it is a life decision. I mean, you go one place, you can't go back the other way. So I think the longer you can wait and the more opportunities to see where you're at with your game, with different circumstances, the better off you are. And I think the BC Junior Hockey League really gives kids that opportunity for sure.
You get into 9 games with the Lakers in 84, 85, 1 goal, 5, 6 points in 9 games for a young man such as yourself. Those are pretty good numbers. Any AP would take those numbers in that many games played. What was that sort of experience like for you? Can you take us back to your first time skating out on the civic ice for the first time in front of friends and family, and sort of what that means to you?
Well, like I said, I was 15 and I don't know if I knew any better. I was I'd grown up in that arena. I had watched the, Stacy Wakabayashi was my favorite player when I was about 10 or 11, a little fireball of a forward there for Vernon. And then, the Nick Kapickis and stuff, guys that, I kind of idolized in minor hockey and all of a sudden got an opportunity to play. It was a little eye-opening. Maybe wasn't as good as I thought I was, but I always was only 15, but I thought maybe I could go in there and really do something. I think it only lasted 9 or 10 games. I got a few points, but it gave me the belief that I could play there, gave me the belief that if I got stronger that I would be okay there the following year. But the Greg Cowells, the Nick Kapickis, the veterans of that group, really took care of me, were instrumental for me to, feel comfortable and be part of the team, even as a young player at that age.
Well, it's interesting to look at, some of the numbers and the way it goes. You make the group again the year after, 85, 86, as a 16-year-old, and oh my goodness, the points are spectacular. I mean, take us through, before we sort of dissect that a little bit. I mean, 43 goals, 62 assists, 105 points, 16 years old, 51 games played. I mean, those are spectacular numbers. I mean, sort of walk us through what your role ended up being when you started and sort of how it developed and how some of the older players, maybe the leaders of the group that helped instill the culture, how they helped guide you and support you as you were able to put up that many points.
Well, definitely wasn't going in thinking I was going to be be that productive offensively, but Don Moore's our coach, gave me an opportunity on the power play right away. And the power play was good. I mean, I had Troy Mick was on the team also as a 16-year-old, and only lasted a few games, and then went to Merritt. And then I started playing with the Poole brothers, Trevor and Troy Poole, and we caught a little bit of lightning in a bottle. They were tough and physical, and they were a bit of my pit bulls, and I was able to do my business, and it was a real good year, And then we had Shannon Poole, who was another good veteran forward that, just showed me maybe not how to play, but how to be a good junior and go into tough buildings like Merritt and compete. Not the biggest guy, but to stand your ground. Back in the day in the BC Junior Hockey League, there was no place to hide. I mean, the Vernon had a small arena, Penticton was small, Merritt was small, Salmon Arm played in a tiny little arena. You had to come to play, and that was, I think, was my I felt made myself feel good that I knew I could go into a tough building and be productive and not back down as a little, as a smaller skilled player. So we had Murray Barron back on defense, who had a great pro career, but he was a guy that I looked up to in our dressing room. But we had some really good players. Wes Gentles was a great leader, and like I say, I was very fortunate those couple years or year and a half, whatever, to play with some really good veteran players. So I mean, I tried to take that forward when I went to Portland and take guys, no matter if they're young or inexperienced or first new on the team, to feel welcome and to feel part of the group sure means a lot, no matter what business or what organization you're in.
It's really interesting to take a look at, at least on your profile, you're listed about 5'10". I imagine when you're 16 years old, you're not 5'10" yet. How does that, and back when, maybe I'm assuming here, but the game was quite a bit different. They talk about how difficult it is to be an undersized player now and how shifty you have to be. I would imagine in a league where you're in small buildings, small ice surfaces against guys who are 4 years older than you and probably outweigh you and outsize you, how did you sort of adjust and fit your game to be successful? But I guess you have to have a bit of toughness in your game as well to survive.
I think you do. I think it's one of the things that we look for as we scout is hockey sense, the ability to kind of have the game slow down and know where things are going to happen a split second before that occurs. A God-given talent. I could read plays, I could see plays set up quickly. And then, when you play as a smaller guy, and it was a big, it was a physical league back then. You look at the penalty minutes for some of these guys. It was a little bit sometimes, WWE out there whacking and slashing. But I think as you grew up, and I think in that era, as a smaller player, you survived or you didn't get it done. And I was very fortunate. Like I said, Nick Kapicki was a hard-nosed little fireball. Greg Cowell wasn't big. Guys that just played just before me. So I had good role models watching when like I said, I didn't miss many Vernon games growing up. I was a bit of a rink rat. My dad was managers of all these teams. And so my mom ran the concession stand. I wasn't far from being at the rink every day. So, and like I say, I think it's important to have good role models to see guys that are successful, that maybe play similar styles to you, that have success. And those really say those guys were important to my progression in the game.
You guys had a pretty good season, all things considered, when it came to regular season. You had a good season when it came to point production, but didn't last very long. You guys didn't make a huge run into the postseason. What was your playoff experience like? The old hockey cliche is, playoff experience is invaluable and you don't get it until you sort of go through the process. You learn how to win, you learn how to lose, and rivalries are developed. Again, sort of going back to the postseason, what do you remember about those experiences, and how did that help you moving forward when you decided, which we'll talk about in a minute, the decision to jump to the Western League?
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, Penticton, I believe, was first, and they didn't. I'm not sure if they even had 10 losses that year. They were loaded for bear, and they were going to make they wanted to make a run. Kelowna had a really good team. They had 3 or 4 guys, I believe, had come back from the WHL, and they were a good strong team. And that was our first round matchup. We were the 3 seed, and they were 2. And 2 small arenas, and we knew it was going to be a war. It went back and forth. I actually, it was tougher and more intense than I didn't realize. I remember not having great, first opening 3 or 4 games, but it went to game 7 overtime, and I said I played 8 or 9 years pro, and one of my main goals that I remember. Was late in the game. It was just under a minute left in the game. And I picked the puck up on a turnover in the neutral zone, and I was able to beat the defender and beat. I mean, like I said, I remember it was yesterday. Frank Romeo was in net. He came up with a big challenge, and I was able to get around him and score and put us into overtime for game 7. We lost it. And I'm not sure if we would have had enough, gas in the tank to take on the tough Penticton team. But like I said, one of my favorite goals in my hockey career. It's one of those memories that it feels like it was yesterday.
It's pretty phenomenal when you look at the career that you had and your involvement in the game, that there's a goal in your first full season of junior hockey in your hometown for your hometown team, and that still stands out as one of your biggest goals. That's a pretty impressive thing. I guess at the time it sort of gets overlooked, but as time continues to go on, you still kind of look back to those experiences as things that helped guide you to where you were going.
It really did, yeah. I mean, at the time I didn't realize it was going to be that big for me. But yeah, once you play and you finish and you start reminiscing with people, and they're asking for stories, and what were some big goals you scored, and you start thinking back, and you're like, you know what, that goal late in game 7, and you game 7s are special as it is, and then to be able to tie it up late. The small little Kelowna building was absolutely, they were hanging from the rafters, and it helps you, I think, in games, in tough situations, when you have some success, moving forward, to being able to slow your heart down a little bit, to just breathe a little more, and be able to make plays under pressure.
You after that season comes to a conclusion, at least that season you played 1 game in the Western Hockey League, and if the numbers aren't mistaken, you had a pretty good game. A 5-point night is what it says on the research that I've been doing, and your 1 call up in 85-86. Were the rules the same back then when it came to the NCAA eligibility? Once you played a game, it was sort of wiped out. And if that was the case, was there any hesitation to maybe playing that game? Obviously, looking backwards, not a mistake whatsoever. But, as a young player, you get the call up. You obviously get a chance to play in that game. You have a lot of success in that game. But were the rules the same? Was there any hesitation on your part to maybe participate in that game in 85-86?
Well, it was. I mean, I was in talks with Portland from about January on. They were putting on the full court press to come and play and join them, and they were going to host the Memorial Cup that year. And it was, yeah. My parents and I, we had a lot of discussions, a lot of head scratching. What should we do? I mean, I had 3 or 4 colleges already sort of hot on my trail. At that point, I guess for me, I felt the opportunity to get drafted and maybe potentially be a pro hockey player was going to be the avenue, was going to be my best avenue. And that's when I jumped there at the end of the Vernon season, called me up, and I mean, I'm going from Vernon, and where the Civic Arena could hold 1,000 people, And that first night was it was the end of the regular season, so it was some big season ticket holder thing, and it was just over 10,000 people in the crowd. So it was quite surreal. I got back with my old minor hockey teammate Troy Mick, who had been there. So I played on the same line as Troy that night. Stars aligned for sure. It was Billy Ranford was in net for New West that night. It was, I got an opportunity. The season was over in the sense that the playoffs, playoff seeding. So the coach played us lots, gave us an opportunity on the power play. 3 goals and 2 assists in your first Western Hockey League game. I wasn't expecting that. I was just hoping to survive. They were bigger and faster than I was accustomed to. So it gave me lots of confidence moving forward and throughout my career in Portland, that first game for sure.
Well, and you put up those points against a future NHLer and a Stanley Cup winner in Billy Ranford. That had to be sort of, not now, or now more so than back then, but that had to be even something to highlight even more is, you're going up against a guy who had a really good NHL career, and you're able to put up 5 points in your first game.
I was very fortunate. I went to good opportunities. The Vernon situation was excellent. Got an opportunity to play. Got to stay at home. Portland had a fantastic operation and organization going. We had the Jeff Finleys, and we had a half dozen guys that had been drafted at that point. So they knew what they were doing. But it was tough. I was now moving away from home, 10-hour, car ride away. A little bit of a homebody at that time. So there was an adjustment. I was very fortunate. Like I say, Troy Mick was there. I had a sort of bit of a running buddy, a guy from my hometown that I could lean on. But great memories of playing in Vernon, and wouldn't have been bad if I would have gone back there. I think Mel List buys the franchise the next year, and it really puts the Vernon operation on the world's, Canadian stage. Then Duncan Ray takes it over. I'm very fortunate and very proud to say, I'm a member of this Vernon team, because like you say, it's a storied franchise.
Looking through the numbers as we do, you end up playing, a playoff run in your first year, and then 3 more seasons after that. 113 points, 144 points, 167 points in your final year of junior. But in between that time, you accomplish your goal. You get drafted in the 3rd round by the Detroit Red Wings in the '87 entry draft. How much did that sort of just cement the fact that you were happy with the decision that you made? Either one was going to be the right one, but I guess with the goal of being drafted and being a professional hockey player, your experiences in Portland seem to have really helped you.
Well, it really did. Like I said, it was a class organization. Them and probably the Kamloops Blazers were sort of the 2 kingpins of the operation at that time. Ken Hodge gave me nothing but ice time and opportunity, helped me grow my game and develop the skills that helped me play, 9 years professional. We look at players at 15, 16, 17, and they're just learning at that stage, and that's they're developing skills. They're like developing off ice life skills at the time. It's interesting the job that we do. You can go in and watch a kid in September and say, not ready, and then you go back in January and you go, wow, this young man has taken a step. Something has clicked, and that it's a different hockey player. And then that's the exciting part about our job is you don't know what you're going to see. The season is like reading a book. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. You don't know what you're really going to get till you close the book and say, that's a player, or boy, he still needs work, or he's just a good junior, and nothing wrong with that. There's hundreds of thousands of guys that would love to play junior hockey. So we just try to be patient. We let the players do the work, and we just take notes and hopefully slot them in the right positions.
What was the professional experience like for you? Obviously, it's very cool for the city of Vernon to have a couple of guys who were local that have made an impact on the hockey community. Looking through some of these things, though, lots of AHL, IHL experience. What was the professional experience like for you? On here, it doesn't say anything about an NHL call up or something to that effect. Was being a professional hockey player what you expected it to be, or was it maybe a little bit more difficult?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it was more difficult than I think I thought. I mean, you played such a great success in junior. I think a lot of people, yeah, and I did. I think you go in with a little bit of a cocky attitude. I'm just going to step in and do it. As you get higher in your leagues, everyone's a good player. Everybody was a top scorer on their team. Everybody was an MVP at some point. I mean, it's tough. When I got drafted by Detroit in very original six, and a team that was sort of up and coming, the centermen that I was trying to beat out were Steve Yzerman, Fedorov, these kind of guys. And at the end of the day, you look back and you kind of take stock of maybe what happened or what didn't happen. My skating at the end of the day wasn't strong enough for a guy that my size. We were still hooking and holding. There was clutching and grabbing. I just couldn't generate that space and time that I had in junior hockey. And I played in some great cities. I had some strong season in the minor leagues, but it just wasn't meant to be. I mean, I got the Russian Red Army team toured in I think it was 90 or 91. And there was about 4 of us that got called up to play against the Russian Red Army team in Joe Louis Arena. Sold out crowd. Yeah, I mean that was as close as I got to playing in the National Hockey League. I mean, I very fortunate and very you look back at when you're going through the process, you're like, oh, I was blessed. I really was blessed. I mean, I've been in the game of hockey now my whole career. That I all my success, everything that I have comes from this game. So it's the best game in the world for me, and I'm very fortunate. I really do try to take stock and give back and help people out that ask questions. I'm always free to give them my opinions.
Probably best if I unmute myself. In 97, 98, that's sort of the end of the line, the Toledo Storm. At what point did you sort of decide that scouting was going to be something that you wanted to do? I imagine you wanted to stay involved in the game in some form or fashion. There was some coaching experience in there as well. Life after being a player, what sort of transitions did you have to go through before settling on scouting career with the Stars?
Well, I think when you talk to a lot of ex-athletes of any sort, there's a big adjustment going from being a sports person to working out and just playing a game to all of a sudden you're sort of thrust into the real world, and the real world's a tough place. I was very fortunate to stay on in Toledo and do a little assistant coaching, and then got an opportunity to coach 2 years in the East Coast Hockey League. I really enjoyed my time. It's a tough racket, that coaching. Wasn't sure if that was going to be in my cards for the long haul. The Dallas Stars were looking for a scout at that point. I knew scouting a little bit in the sense that my brother had been scouting and was scouting at that time, and I had long talks with him. I had a small family. I didn't want to start moving around too much. This gave me an opportunity to sort of get a home base and go from there. Kept me in the game. The only thing that I knew and only had a real passion for. But like I said, I'm very fortunate because I know there's lots of guys that would love to get into what I'm doing and stay in the game. And I don't take that lightly. I work hard. I try my best and try to be a good citizen, a good employee, good employee for the Dallas Stars.
Let's talk a little bit about scouting. I mean, it's the sort of position that, can be huge for a franchise. I mean, you talk about your brother and the Red Wings always had a pipeline, and I'm sure you hear it all the time about the Zetterbergs and the guys who were drafted late. And, before we started recording this, you sort of mentioned that those are the money picks. Those are the fun ones when if you can hit on a late round pick or a guy that you're not necessarily expecting to have a huge career. What sort of things were you looking for early on? What are some of the day-to-day of a scout? See you guys at games all the time, but when it comes to the evaluation process, do you generally come in with a particular player that you're looking at? Are you looking at a couple of different players? What sort of strategies are implemented when it comes out to who you're watching and how many games you get to?
Well, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you're really trying to paint your own picture. I mean, everybody's has their 2 cents. Who's going to be the next guy, and you got to watch this guy. You really need to go in. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you live and you work off your experiences from previous years, what you see with your own eyes, what worked, what didn't work, sometimes the bigger, stronger guy that's a good skater, he fools you a little bit because sometimes those guys maybe don't have the hockey sense. Maybe they're hit their ceiling. I mean, what we're projecting is trying to figure out who has the highest ceiling, who has the most ability to get to the farthest and the best player out of this group. And sometimes it's the guy that's 155 pounds that has great hockey sense and a great desire, but hasn't had the opportunity to show it yet. So the tough part, but one of the challenges we have is we're not always watching the number one centerman or the number one defenseman on any given team. We might be watching the third line right winger who isn't getting any power play time. We're trying to evaluate on limited shifts. So you're watching everything. You're watching how does he go back to the bench? How does he, how does he have impact within his game and opportunities that show you that if given him more opportunities, he's going to give you more. Like I say, it could be just little things. But at the end of the day, you got to see guys get better. When I see a young player in September playing, he needs to be better by November. He needs to be better by January. So it's a process. It's a learning curve. So that's why when you guys when people ask, well, how many games did you get to this year? We'll say to you, I got to 150 hockey games, or I got to 175 hockey games with tournaments. The only way you get a great read on players is seeing them lots, and that's going to games, and that's getting your bum in your car and driving places and doing the work.
It's a very interesting comment that you made there about watching and evaluating them, even as they exit the ice for a line change or some of the impacts. I would imagine one piece of advice for a lot of players who are, being looked at or, don't think they're being looked at is to, not necessarily worry about the points all the time. The points at some point are obviously important, but it's the other things, it's the intangibles that a lot of scouts seem to be looking for.
Well, it really is. Like I said, there's only, usually the guy that is leading the team in scoring is a 19 or a 20-year-old. And those guys that we're watching, the guys that maybe the college kids, scouts are watching, are the guys that, are on the peripheral of good minutes and good opportunities in a game. So you're trying to, separate yourself from lots of players on different teams that are on the peripheral of playing. And I think it's the player that comes out of, bantam or midget, and they're all leading scorers, they're all great players, and now all of a sudden you're being asked to do a role, and you can do the role, you accept that role. It just makes you a better, well-rounded player when you get to that opportunity at 18 and 19 to play and kill penalties. And, you look at the best players in the world, the Sidney Crosby's is the best player on both directions. He's just not the best offensive player. So it's the guys that can accept roles, that can learn, that are teachable, are guys that are very successful, and guys that can continue improving.
Walk us through some of the names. I mean, obviously, with the Vipers being in the BCHL, there have been lots of BCHL talent being drafted more so than ever before. But one big name that seems to pop out was former Grizzly, a big star with the Stars in Jamie Benn. I'm sure he's one of the high watermark guys that you got to watch and sort of evaluate. But maybe take us through some of the other talent that you've seen, whether they ended up with the Stars or not, where you've watched certain players and gone, you know what, I think those guys, as you said, might have high ceilings.
Well, like I say, yeah, we were very fortunate to get Jamie Benn in the 5th round. I mean, I thought if I would have thought he was going to be as good as he was, I would have taken him in the 1st round. But saw there was a little bit of skating deficiencies, stuff that he still needed to get stronger at. Worked at his game. He was fiery, had an NHL shot, and he's having an excellent career and is one of the all-time Dallas Star players. Even you look for Grant, like his brother Jordy Benn, undrafted 20-year-old defenseman, just kind of playing it out, just hoping to get college, is having an excellent NHL career. I think it just shows you that players develop and get it. The light comes on at different stages, at different times of their career. I mean, I think it's those players that get told no and go back home and work on their games and work on their deficiencies are the guys that ultimately have success in the world and have a success in sports and are the guys that you want to go into foxhole with. But yeah, like so, there's so many great players. Kyle Turris was a great junior player. Some of the best players that I've seen have come out of the BC Junior Hockey League. We have lots of great skill. I mean, it's definitely maybe wasn't as the venue to go if you were trying to get to the NHL back in the mid and early 80s. But definitely now, the college route is important and is as successful as any other league or opportunity in the world these days.
Finally, Dennis, as we sort of wrap up, maybe a summary of how the city of Vernon and your 1 year as a Laker and the hockey community as a whole is in the place that it has in the hockey universe. Obviously, it's important. So many people, it's affected so many people, yourself included, your family, so many others. Maybe just speak to the hockey market that is Vernon as we wrap up here.
Well, like I say, you don't really get to pick where you were born and where you were raised from, but we're very fortunate to be born and raised in Vernon, a great sports town. From our general manager was Vern Dye, who is a well-known person in the community back in the day. But we had the Brent Gilchrist and George Fargers and the Ernie Gares, and we've had such great people and that have lived in Vernon, that have been part of Vernon's success. And then saying that just the people of Vernon is a special group. They're great sports fans. They're knowledgeable. They're passionate. Like I said, when somebody asks where you played, I'm very proud to say that I had a stop in in Vernon. The Dave Olivers. I mean, I could name off some really good players and people and that have had success that have kind of wandered through the Civic Arena and now the new building. But Vernon has a special heart. I played all over the world in Germany. Vernon is good a little hockey community as you're going to find.
Dennis, we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for sharing some stories with us, your experiences. We really appreciate it. And, when hockey goes back and next time you happen to be at Cal Tire Place, we'll make sure to connect for a radio chat. Thank you so much for this.
Excellent. Anytime. Yeah. Good luck. And hopefully we're back at the rinks before we know it.